So hello, I'm Maya Grace in case you don't know. And today I'm going to tell you how to make the tiny bow, turn it into a little bow ring. I'm going to show you how to use the little heart pattern piece and how to do some cool things with it. And I'm also going to show you how to make the little tea bag brooch, because this isn't a real tea bag. This is real tea. This is not a real tea bag. All of these patterns are part of my bow pack pattern set, which is designed to supplement all of the upcoming Lolita patterns that are on the way. And in this pattern, you will find the long bow and all of its 4 variations. You'll find the tiny, little, basic, and big old bows and all the variations of them. You'll find the baby bat, the batty, and the stacked bat bows. And then of course all these little extras that I just mentioned. While these patterns are all on one printable PDF, the video tutorials are being split into chunks, and they are all hosted on the Maya Grace Sews channel. And of course there are chapters in the description box below to help you navigate this video. So the little heart decoration, which I have attached to a clip here, it can be used as a little dangly fabric charm and attached to a head bow or one of the half bonnet headdresses. Or it could be used in combination with the tea bag brooch instead of using a more like standard realistic looking tea tag made out of fabric. It also is really cute if you like put it on the center part of a bow, like attach it to the little bow ribbon that holds it together. I just wanted to make something for the sweet Lolitas because I know I am a gothic Lolita at my heart and I have a tendency to put spider webs and bats and things like that in my creations. So I'm trying to think about the sweet girlies. If you're a sweet girly, let me know like what it is that you like to see or what you're looking for, what you'd like to make, because I don't fully understand you guys. But back to the little heart charm, it can also be used as an applique. And then the little tea bag brooch is really cute to just pin to accessories. I like to put it on headdresses and have the tea tags kind of like dangle. I get a lot of compliments on it, so many in fact that I gave both of the ones I made previously away, and I had to make 2 new ones to go with my sweet matcha cord. The tiny bow is also really great when you just need a little bit of a pop of color or a tiny bit of texture to add to something, like a wrist cuff, or it could be really cute on a collar of a blouse. And of course I really love using it as a ring, otherwise I just wouldn't have rings that perfectly match my cords. And it's a great way to use up those tiny little scraps that you have left over after making a project. And you wind up with something that you can actually wear with your main piece that you were working on. But that's enough of me talking. Let's head over to the sewing room. The little heart tag is a great way to add a sweet over-the-top kind of vibe to your bows. And there's a couple of ways to use it that we're gonna go over today. The first thing that you're going to want to do is cut out 2 of your heart, or at least 2 for every heart that you want to make. So I've decided I want 2 hearts, so I'll be cutting out 4 fabric pieces. When working with little decorative pieces like this that have a highly specific shape, what you're going to want to do is follow the stitch lines as exactly as possible. I like to mark my stitch lines with a washable ink or a heat erase ink. You're going to want to start at the back corner of your heart and begin with a back stitch. You want to start there so that whenever you turn things right side out, it doesn't mess with the shape of your heart. You'll see that as I'm working, I go a couple of stitches and will occasionally put my needle in the down position, lift my foot, and rotate my work. This helps me follow the curve as exactly as possible. This isn't a race, so feel free to go as slowly as you need to. And whenever you come around to the last section of your heart, you're going to want to leave about an inch gap so that you're able to turn it right sides out later. Remember to backstitch before moving on. Before turning your heart inside out, you're going to want to clip your corners and put little notches in your seam allowance. This will allow you to turn it right sides out without the stitching lines pulling on the fabric from the inside and making it look kind of funky. You can also trim your seam allowance so that it is only about 1/12 of an inch from the stitch lines. But whenever you do this, you'll want to be very careful while turning your heart inside out, and you can have issues with threads of your fabric coming out of the stitching, so I prefer to just rely on notches as much as possible. But here are 2 hearts cut both ways so that you can compare and contrast on lightweight fabric. If you have a thicker, more stubborn fabric, you're going to want to spray it with water and get it as wet as possible, and then pull the seam outward with a pin. You can see that I'm stroking it to make sure that it is fully pulled right sides out, and then I am pinning it down to my ironing board. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this to kind of get some of that water out and get it to hold its shape. This works well for, like I said, thicker or more stubborn fabrics, because sometimes turning it with a bodkin and pushing it from the inside isn't actually going to get it to stay in place, it's going to turn in on itself. Before moving on and using your little heart decoration, you might want to close the open side with a ladder stitch. This is the same stitch that you would use for a little plushie. One of the ways that you can use this little heart decoration is to attach it to the front of one of your bows. You would just simply stitch it down from the back side with a couple of securing stitches, tie off your string, and call it a day. Another way to use it would be to attach it to a hair clip base and use it while styling your hair. I also think that it would be really cute to use one of these things as a little dangle and like attach it to the end of a bow and have it like dripping downwards, but I haven't experimented with that yet. But that was one of the things that I had in mind when I designed this pattern piece. Now, of course, another way to use this pattern piece is to applique it onto one of your bows. Here you see that I have my sewing machine. I am simply using a satin stitch. This is my favorite way to do applique because it is so fast and so easy. However, I would recommend using a spray based to do this because it prevents any kind of wrinkling during your process and helps you get a much cleaner line because your pins can kind of like warp the fabric as you're sewing. Depending on your machine and how tight it does its satin stitch, you might want to go around twice just to help get a very solid professional looking line. I have to go around mine twice because I just can't get it to overlap on itself nice enough without doing it that way. Then you're going to go ahead and trim your raw edges off. I'm using the sharpest scissors that I have and trimming just a little bit at a time and pulling my raw edges to get it out of the way so that I don't clip my threads by accident and can also get as much of the raw edge cut off as possible. Now this applique works best on a larger bow, such as the big old bow, but could also work on a skirt or a bodice. The tea bag brooch is one of my favorite pieces, and I am so excited to share it with you. You're going to want to use a lightweight sheer chiffon or possibly a cotton muslin, but something that is very natural looking and kind of reminds you of what a typical tea bag would be made out of. Now before you go and sew up your tea bag, you may want to mark your fold lines. This is so that it'll be easier if you're less confident with folding it up. However, it's really not that difficult, so if you don't feel like marking your lines, you do not have to. Now for your tea tag, you can use any fabric you like, but it is cut on the fold. This is a great way to use up little scraps that you might have left over from any sewing project you've done. These little kawaii scrap busters are a great way to make sure that the colors and textures of your hand sewn projects are repeating in multiple places in your outfit for harmony's sake. But your first step for making the tea bag is to fold it in half lengthwise and sew it into a tube. Remember to backstitch at the beginning and end of your stitching line, and then you're going to turn your tube right sides out. You're going to finger press the seam so that it lays nicely, and you're going to want the seam to be in the center back. And whenever you go to fold it like a tea bag, you're going to stagger the raw edges a little bit. You're going to want about 1/2 inch or a little bit less than 1/2 inch in between the two of them. You're going to fold the corners in, creating a triangle, and you're going to want to look at the tip of your triangle, and if you have any fraying bits or any longer pieces of your fabric, go ahead and trim that so you have a sharp corner before turning that corner down just over the edge of the bottom of your triangle. So all of the raw edges should be basically covered, and you're going to pin it in place with a straight pin and kind of let it sit for a little while to see if it's pinned correctly, because whenever you sew it down, you're just going to be sewing it in a little loop. And if something isn't caught by the pin in the place where you're going to put your stitches, you want to find out now instead of later. And you can see that I just sewed it together with a very simple single stitch and just went around like a loop using gray thread so that it would look like a real tea bag. So let's work on our tea tag now. What you're going to do is fold the two long ends in towards the center and press that well. And then you're going to fold the raw ends under and press that well as well before folding the whole thing in half and pinning it so it stays. You're going to take it over to your sewing machine and sew around the very edges with a straight stitch and a complementary color of thread. And speaking of thread, you're going to want to use a heavier quilting thread or a buttonhole thread for your tea bag string. What I'm doing is I'm simply using the needle to get it into the fabric and doing a tie-off stitch before attaching it to the tea bag as well. Now, as cute as this looks, you can decorate your tea tag if you wish. What I'm going to do is embroider a very simple heart on mine because I think it makes it look just a little bit cuter and more elevated. Also, when you're using this as a brooch, you do not have to sew it to a brooch base. You can simply use a safety pin to go in from the inside and pin it to whatever you wish. Now let's make a bow ring. The tiny bow is constructed very similarly to the basic bows. The only real difference is that it is so small. So it is mostly gap in the back seam. You will want to iron it with the seam in the back and then sew the side seams just as we did before for the basic bows. You will want to trim your seam allowances though before turning it inside out, because if they're too bulky, it can make your bow look a little bit clunky and strange. Now the tiny bow is too small to use a bow ribbon to hold it together in the middle. So because of that, we're going to do our stitches very even and very clean and very tight. You see me go through with a running stitch after folding it and pressing with my fingers to see the crease lines and make sure that I'm stitching exactly where I want to. Now I'm taking the little ribbon of fabric that I've sewn and turned right sides out, and I'm measuring it on my finger, and I'm turning the raw edges under before taking it off of my finger and whip stitching the raw edges to the ring itself. I'm also taking my same thread that I'm whip stitching the ring together with, and I am stitching the bow to the ring. This looks really complicated, especially because I keep pulling it up close to my face to see it and pulling it out of line of the camera, which I apologize for. But I promise you that this bow ring is as simple to assemble as create a loop that fits around your ring finger, put the raw edges under, whip stitch the raw edges down, and then attach the little bow to the loop. An even better way to make this bow ring is to get some polyester grosgrain ribbon and heat seal the ends, and then make your loop and attach the bow to it. This way you don't have to worry about putting raw edges under, and it sits a little bit closer to your finger. If you're looking for a perfect match to the bow itself, you can use self fabric if that's important to you. Now obviously a bow ring is a little bit impractical, and its real purpose is to just give you one more accessory that you can make that would perfectly match your main piece. I would remove the bow and place it in your pocket or handbag if you're going to be washing your hands or touching anything that could be wet or messy, just to avoid any heartbreak. In the description box below is where you'll find a link to my Ko-fi, where you'll find all of my printable PDF patterns, such as the Cloud Queen bloomers, which are getting tweaked soon because apparently they don't have a size medium. And of course the headdress pattern and others coming soon. So keep your ear to the ground. This channel and all of my free PDF sewing patterns are only made possible by viewers like you. And speaking of viewers like you, if you've followed one of my tutorials, or you just happen to have made something cool that you want to show off, or you want to hype up one of your friends who happens to be an artist, there is a link to a Google form in the description box below. You can show me the cool stuff that you've made and tell me about it, and yourself, for a chance to be featured. You can also brag about someone else and tell me about them, whichever you prefer. So if you liked this video, be sure to give it a like so that more awesome people like you can see it. And I've got some great sewing patterns that are in the works for y'all, so stay tuned. Bye, friends! Alrighty, that was the whole video. There you go, Brb I. Like something that a sweet Lolita who sews. Oh, it's 3 o'clock.